the natural progression of a tier one agent is to be a tier two agent, a manager, supervisor, point of escalation.
Yeah.
Who over time is then, creating a system, updating the training materials, doing everything to, set up the new generation of agents, right? So instead, they're becoming AI developers, right?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Deep Learning with PolyAI podcast. I'm your host, Damien, and I am here as per usual with CEO and co-founder of PolyAI, Nikola Mrkšić. Hey, Nikola,
Well, not much. How are you? Ready for
I'm doing. I am very ready for the weekend, especially after yesterday, which was a high activity, a high emotion, action-packed day where we just wrapped our 2024 VOX Horizons annual conference. It was virtual this year. We stuck with what worked. It was so big, we had 2 tracks. I thought today it would be great to chat with 1, the keynote provider, and 2, the CEO of the company who put on the dang thing, to discuss a little bit about some of the concepts that our customer and end user participants brought up during their session, and maybe just drill down a little bit deeper to kind of get your take as to, some of the trends that were brought up, some of the factoids that were mentioned, and if this is typical, if this is novel, or is this something that's on sort of the cutting edge of what we can expect for voice AI and automation in the contact center? What do you think?
Absolutely. I think we heard a lot of good stuff, and we're lucky to have so many people there. So happy to go over it.
Yeah, it was a blast. Let's start at the start, right? Which was your keynote. Really insightful stuff talking about sort of the state of the union with regards to the industry of voice automation and or voice AI and automation in the contact center. One of the things that you really spoke on was how automatic speech recognition has really not progressed, or at least this is the way I interpret it, has really not progressed as much as we thought it would, as being such a critical and crucial component of the SLU tech stack. So I'm really curious. And you mentioned something about, 15 years ago, there were 2 organizations that had 2 papers on this, right? It was like Google and Microsoft. They were writing about it and said, okay, we got this faster. And nothing has really come. Well, are still making up 15 and 50, right? So why is DSR so difficult to master?
Yeah, look, I think that it's just about like our voices are all different. They have different properties. We all have different accents, styles, but we're capturing it with different devices, right? So there is no single speech recognition. There are many ways to do it, right? There are constraints around speed and latency. There are constraints around the channel, right? So what we do is a lot of speech recognition over the phone, right? The phone is different countries use different encodings, right? And like these encodings can make all the difference between like the error rate you're gonna get, right? Then people talk on the phone, they use the speakerphone, they use the car surround systems to talk, right? So like you get many different flavors of that, right? Now, what was interesting, and I don't know if I went into proper detail yesterday, but in 2014, Google and Microsoft both had the paper saying, we have human level speech recognition on this relatively complex data set, right? And I think as we've kind of like worked on the problem and, when I started working on it, people told me, hey, speech recognition is improving really fast. There'll be a solved problem. Go focus on the reasoning bit or on the quality of voice produced back. And these are all kind of really matter, right? I think the fact that each of our customers has like a super branded voice that sounds exactly the way they want to sound in every interaction, or different voices that sound the way that they want to sound. Like that helped us with many customers and become what we are today. But the one problem, whenever you look at something not working, whenever you look at containment figures, whenever you see a spike in frustration, and you look under the hood, more often than not, about 3/4 of the time, someone's getting stuck because they have a difficult accent or they're saying something the speech recognition is not capturing, right? So to say that it's not progressed dramatically every 2 years would be wrong. It has. Like as deep learning came, as transformers came, new architectures, right? It's getting better. It keeps getting better. It will be better in 2 years again, right?
And maybe components of that are getting better, like the contextualization gets better and those sort of applications, or is it as a whole, like it's entirely getting more and more human capable?
Well, I mean, human capable is the wrong way to look at it. There's just like, is it transcribing everything to it correctly, right? The truth is, like, if you listen to snippets of me talking and someone like cut out like different sentences, you might not get every word correctly. You might omit something that I think I've said. Maybe I've muttered it out and like it's not really clear what I said. Maybe you take a punt and guess one thing and it would be another, right?
Okay.
So like your error rate would not be like zero, right? Similarly, either it is for machines, right? Now, what you have that these systems don't have yet is the ability to use context to say, hey, like talking about numbers, or, you know, he said this in this way a few times. He probably means this, even though, he's a non-native speaker and, you just learn that, I say something incorrectly. Or sometimes there isn't really a correct word. There are many dialects of different people say different words in different ways, right? Okay. Is it the schedule or is the schedule, right? Like, and with all that done, you basically are at a point that, um, you're waiting for it to be perfect, but it's not. Now, the real problem with customer service is many of the inputs you need to capture are things like names, things like
Yeah,
address.
they're pretty binary. You have to have them accurate, especially in the alphanumeric
Yeah,
system.
someone's their cell phone, 13 seater value, and like what the lark, right? What's the post creation 55 PQ? Right, cool, right? Like, was that a P or a B, right? And that's probably we also talk about dialogue, right? Because while if I happen to say that postcode in a way that's not very comprehensible for that system, right? And you go like, sorry, I didn't get that. Can you say it again? What am I going to do? Should have happy here, right? So we're on a lip, or maybe you get lucky the second time around. But maybe something about my voice footprint with that model doesn't work. And then, you kind of have to go like, was it Papa or Bravo, right? Now it's okay. Then I know that Papa or Bravo, like the following. The classification problem of have you said Papa or Bravo? Now that's really easy compared to like transcribing alphanumeric characters from any member of the population coming into the system, right? So you basically have to build a robust way to like handle those errors, right? And like computer networking has this famous 7-layer stack from like the physical layer all the way to the application layer. You and I are just feeding over this thing. There are probably tens, if not hundreds of milliseconds where the signal is emitted or, like something doesn't go right, whether my Wi-Fi, your Wi-Fi, something in the middle, fiber optic cable. There are many components. We can't even enumerate all the components like the technology is touching in this conversation you and I are having. But even though it's cables are missing bits, like there's fluctuations in latency that mean that like some packages arrive before and after others, it's being assembled. It works. And,
Yeah, we're still hearing each other in real time and having that conversation.
yeah. So
I
similarly,
we're seeing progress. Yeah, we're seeing progress in ASR, and like you said, every 2 years is getting better and better, but it's still just a very complex component of a larger multi-layered tech stack that one that probably gets blamed when things go wrong because it's easy to blame when you do a proper transcription.
it is the culprit, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we showed a pie chart which basically said, 3/4 of failure modes have to do with speech recognition, and there's a 12% to do with dialogue management. So whether you're doing that with like an old school dialogue manager, whether it's programmatic or machine learning driven, or if it's just an LLM that you let run amok, like yeah, it was perfect in our sampling on that data set, and it's just a data set, right? That's pretty damn big. 12%, right? That's the list, right? If you have God model and no latency, you'd get that uplift, right? And that's important to know, right? Because even a lot of people think that the advent of LLMs just solved everything. And actually, some of the problems that they introduced, that 12%, are really, really bad, right? So like control always remain equal, right? So yeah, like it's a hard problem, right? I think that I've been working on this for well over 10 years, and it's huge progress was made. It is better. The real issue is that we're dealing with like sprints of speech recognition, right? The language models, there's two components of a speech recognizer, the audio model and the language model, at least in old school ones. Newer ones are end to end. But a longer sentence allows the language model piece to use context inside that input
right.
to say, oh, he's saying a number. or, oh, that has to be like the name, that has to be the word road at the end because it was like 13, 14, something, something is going to be road or drive or street.
Right. Right.
For our, but especially like what we do, it's not necessarily, right? That EF could be whatever, right? And we've had examples of, Mandarin, Cantonese, where like a flight, like added tonal inflection at the start can,
Yeah, there's a lot of tonality effect that will be
yeah,
for two definitions.
this is all English, right? The problems
Yeah.
are for most other languages a lot more difficult. Although English is fantastic for its variants, it's a huge language we made native dialects, plus all of us foreigners speaking English in our own ways. So English is hard.
English is hard. Allegedly the second most difficult language in the world to learn. Okay. So, what's that?
Maybe by vocabulary, right?
Maybe. Right. So, the opening keynote was great. Take a look at that if you haven't already. One of the first individuals that we spoke with was Lauren Sullivan from Howard Brown Health, and really highlighting some interesting facets and unique nuances to the healthcare industry. But one of the things that brought up was where we see or where we envision things like seasonal spikes in contact centers, especially for support and assistance. We usually think retail approaching the holidays, et cetera, et cetera. But Lauren actually brought up a really interesting piece, which is global pandemics and massive health crises. Just how that can drive a surge of inbound calls into healthcare organizations where it's more than just, I need to return this robe, it doesn't fit. What do I need to do to properly inoculate myself against this global pandemic? I thought it was really interesting that she brought this up. I'm curious from your perspective, what are some other often overlooked contributors to spikes in call center activity across industries that maybe we don't think about when we think about things like, oh, it's tax season. So of course, CPAs or managers are going to get those spikes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I think that for many contact centers out there, like lunchtime is a spike because people are grabbing lunch and, calling the utility company, telco, something.
Sure.
So like that's a big one. In some cases, you'll see spikes from just people commuting to work and back, especially in the US where commutes are kind of like part of daily life for many. Um, that's like the Monday. And then, of course, like for many businesses, they will have big fluctuations between working days and the weekend. Both ways. With a lot of financial services, you'll have spikes maybe around like the times a month people get paid and something's happening, they're paying off something. Many people still call to pay their mortgage monthly, especially in the US. So there's spikes on specific days, right?
So like every other Fridays or whatever when the paycheck hits.
Yeah. Usually things like once a month for those payments, people call to make, right? Then you have events that are like not seasonal but important, like interest rate changes for some of our clients drive behavior quite a lot. And then people call, have questions about the changes to their payments, their effect, etc. Yeah. And then, holidays are always, I think every December across pretty much every vertical, he's a huge spike of calls, right? And then August is interesting, right? In hospitality, in some places you'll spike, in other places you'll see a complete wipeout. So it can be really interesting.
School year effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. A very fascinating topic, Lauren, so check that out again if you haven't seen it. Dan Eddy, also from Simply Health, sitting on a voice assistant that's a year and a half old, 18 months. So we kind of would catch us up to speed as to how the last 18 months have been. And he said outright, and I'm quoting, our customer satisfaction scores have never been higher. Our Trustpilot scores have never been higher. And then later, almost in the same breath, he said, and we were able to slash 4 million pounds out of our operational cost. So this goes back to an episode we recorded a number of months back, which was operational efficiency or low costs. Why not both? And it seems that that's working. Is this the new expectation for this kind of automation in the contact center, to where you're seeing not only reduced costs, but also an increase in customer satisfaction?
Absolutely, right? I think that unless you're running an operation where your agent attrition is super low, everyone's super ramped, motivated, and happy, and you've provided the training, you have a flowing information for all the changes being made, and you have enough people to handle all the spikes and stuff, there's probably a way for you to benefit. Now, if you have that kind of operation, frankly, you're probably not in the market buying software to do anything, because you are one of the very, very privileged few.
For a little bit. They can look more.
They exist, right? Now, if that's not the case, if you're missing some calls, if you have weird seasonality, if you have disputes with your BPOs around handling times and why they're taking too long, uh, then you can probably improve customer experience, right? In one way or another, either by providing more accurate responses, by making sure that no one waits for service, right? And just by, like having a better experience, right? The more fine-grained thing then is like, an agent who's been on the job for 2 weeks versus like a voice assistant trained on 18 months. At some point, not impossible that voice assistants will be better at most things, right? At least in most things that happen very, very frequently, right? And with that, as they get calcified and kind of like become slow, like your voice assistant is another website, right? And you're building it gradually, the same way that you built the website to be like a major, way that you do business with the world, with your consumers, right? At first, maybe you just had some information on it. Then you started adding, you created an account and you allowed people to log in and do things on there, right? And then you thought very carefully about, I think I want them to be able to, I don't know, transfer money between their different accounts, but I'm not sure I'm going to allow them to transfer $100,000, like one of their accounts to somewhere else. I might ask them to come into the branch and bring a form of ID, right? And the same way with a voice assistant, right? You go and you build, right? And the more you build out these flows and things and integrations, the better it gets, right? And the more you build and the longer you tune it to be good at what you need it to be good at, the better it gets. And then the other overlooked thing is that consumer behavior takes a bit of time to settle, right? So even if you use the world's best voice assistant overnight, if people are used to your cranky old DTMS and they know that the right way to get to wherever they need to get to is to hit 77332, right? They might have it saved with the number and then less.
I've done that. I've definitely done that programming
For many people, yeah, absolutely. And with a lot of people who use certain service lines, right? Like who call it their dispatch centers and stuff like that. They know exactly what they're doing. Even if you introduce a better experience, it's a different experience. We all love this scroll. So it takes a bit of time, and there you got to think like long term is it going to be better? And if it's not better, well, then don't fix something that's not broken, right?
Right. He definitely said that things were better. And one of the unexpected outcomes that he had after 18 months is actually taking an effective look at the organizational design. Now, obviously, when you bring in some operational efficiencies, there are some, maybe some lower level positions that can be made redundant. But what he noticed was that he was moving his highly skilled agents to more of a supervisory role, responsible and tasked with overseeing and sort of managing the ongoing fine tuning and training of the voice assistant, to also a point where they were responsible for writing scripts for human agents to be able to validate when, someone was a little, like you said, the cultural difference of being able to talk to an automated assistant. Sometimes people just aren't ready for it. That validated why it was so essential. I thought that was kind of cool to see that it was affecting his operation or his organization. My question to you is, do we see more of this on the front end of doing our deployments where people are concerned about how this is going to affect the organizational design?
Listen, people tend to move and implement when they have a problem, right?
Yeah.
They have abandons, they have missed revenue, they have, service level issues that are, reaching the studio and like the board, right? And at that point, they're looking for a fix, right? So I wouldn't say that most of our customers initially worry about the org design. I think what I've always found really interesting is just how excited people in the contact center are to work with this, because a lot of the other CCAS technology, it's blunt instruments, right? And I mean, some is more sophisticated than other, but like there's an agent screen, there's a workforce management tool, set up like the skill groups. And it's kind of boring, right? And then
Yeah.
there's some querying that's maybe a bit more interesting, especially if there's something machine learning powered. But when you think about this, right, the natural progression of a tier one agent is to be a tier two agent, a manager, supervisor, point of escalation.
Yeah.
Who over time is then, creating a system, updating and sharing materials, doing everything to, set up the new generation of agents, right? So instead, they're becoming AI developers, right? And that's kind of like, the whole fear of, are we going to have something to do, in a few years? Well,
Always.
with technology, we displace some jobs and we create new ones, right? And I think that this is actually quite a change for the better for a lot.
It's mind blowing to think of how these folks who maybe experience contact center agents now are being told, like, you will have proficiencies in AI, dialogue design, systems management. Like the concept of that being sort of the new career path is wild.
And it's really cool, right? And like, by the way, like people who have been in the contact center for a while are naturally really good at this stuff, right?
Yeah.
They are there training one by one, sometimes maybe for like onboarding, especially with more humans. That's what they do. So,
And they know what sounds right. They know what's on brand. They know what work. They know how to deal with real customers, especially in their
yeah,
business or industry. So it's essential. It's really essential to get the maximum
yeah,
out of them.
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. Another person who spoke at Vox was Joe Lai over at Hopper, the travel platform. And Joe said, and I quote, "A brilliant AI solution does not a knowledge base make," which is true, as a number of organizations are basically having holes punched in their knowledge management programs when entertaining CS automation. What do you see that companies are doing to better organize their internal data stores in preparation for deploying something like a voice assistant?
Whenever they can, there's no playbook. Now, here's what's interesting, right? Often in the early days of deployment, the customer will turn around and start saying, "Oh, you did this wrong. You did this wrong. You did this wrong," and then they'll kind of like feel mature answer, "Oh, we gave you this information, right?" Well, it's actually a really good way to flush out the stuff in your knowledge bases that is not correct, right? And you could go there and comb through it, and maybe there are answers to questions that no one even asked, right? So when you start running it, I think it's just about, you could polish and polish and polish, or you could just go live. And then as soon as you see that things are really getting off rails, or, that people are complaining that something wasn't wrong, then the issue surfaces. At the moment, whatever knowledge base you're going to give an AI agent is probably the knowledge base that your human agents use, but you don't know it's providing that information. You might find out occasionally, but my experience is that there are competing incentives, right? Agents are there trying to take as many calls as possible, especially if there are too many calls. At the same time, it's in the interest of the organization for these guys to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I don't think this is right. I just like spent quite some time." And, they might figure it out. They might go on the website. They might see a different resource with like a conflicting piece of information. They might ask their tier two agent and, Macaulay might like to say, like, there's a lot of tribal knowledge, right? So like maybe a group of agent knows, but another group doesn't, right? And like you just haven't codified it because, I mean, whenever you look at an agent screen in the contact center, there's like 50 things up, right?
Yeah, and
And
they
then
have to have it up on their mind.
yeah,
Yeah, they're concerned with reducing that average handling time. They're concerned with churning through as many calls as possible. Like, what are the chances that what if they had a bad day and they're just like, "I don't want to take this note right now. I'm not going to submit this. I'm not going to like go for some sort of like change order."
well, it's often not there, and whoever, like maybe they submit feedback to someone who doesn't understand what that feedback means, or you were to push that information out, at least by creating the knowledge base that your voice assistant uses, then like you're codifying it. You're agreeing on that single source of truth. Ideally, you have it already, but if you don't, you should have it. It's good for your organization, even if you don't have a virtual agent.
No, that's a good point. Joe, also one of the end user organizations in our customer base that has been like utilizing a platform to sort of manage their generative voice assistant and, take more control into their organization as opposed to us sort of building the software and then having them run it and manage and support it, which we still do. But this puts more of that in the control of the customer. That was a big piece of our product roadmap, which was announced at the end of Vox, and Devadas and Sean and folks in our product team and Megan all went through and like talked a little bit about a roadmap. It was largely around greater capabilities within this generative platform. Is this going to be the new norm for deployments for voice assistants in the contact center? Will people basically be building and managing their own off of platforms?
They'll definitely be managing them. I think it's a huge space where, our goal has always been to provide the full experience and then to support all along the way, right? We tend to do a lot of hand holding at the start of that partnership where like the initial version, and frankly, we provide a lot of consultation around, well, what should your knowledge base look like so that a generative agent can actually make use of it, right? Because it might be good for a human, but maybe it's not in the right structure to be ingested in. And although that's usually not a huge problem. So different companies have different appetites. We have clients that do a lot of the build themselves and, we kick them off and then they're off to the races and they do all that.
Well, putting the baby birds out of the nest. You got this.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, and there are other companies that are not like that. I think that is the beauty of working with, I think we had a slide and we enumerated 19 different verticals, depending on how you look at it, right? Like healthcare is not the same thing as insurance. It's not the same thing as a banking. And, the challenger bank is not the same thing as a tier one pan-European bank either, right? So technology is messy. It takes people. It takes aligning a lot of people, roadmaps, architecture, security. So there are places where it's easier to fully self-serve. And there are places where, the customer may not be equipped with the right skill set. And with things evolving so fast, many of them can benefit from like a quick start. And that's really about time to value, right? We talked about that piece where, Gartner is now turning quite negative on like the outlook of most generative AI POCs. And most of them went to production. I mean, they're saying it like it's a bad thing, but the point of pilots, right, to test technology and the 10% of huge impact, that's still a good thing, right? But, I think that if you want to make the success rate of these deployments a bit higher than 10%, you roll up your sleeves and you do a lot of the work with your customers, right? You show them how you learn from them, right? Because most companies that are starting off, and we were like this once as well, look, we don't know a whole lot about the contact center, about how they work, about how to prioritize things, how they organize their knowledge, what their priorities are. So by working with them, you're kind of like building it for them. But again, build a platform where they can do much of it themselves.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. And I guess we'll see what the future holds. But like you said, everyone has their own flavor, right? And they're all going to approach it, but it's becoming easier and easier for organizations to sort of manage their deployments. Good stuff. I think we're running up on time. If you haven't had a chance to check out bots, the recordings are going to be available here really soon. So keep an eye on our YouTube channel for that information and check it out. A lot of really great client stories. And I didn't even get a chance to touch on all the partnership stuff we had with AWS, Twilio, Zendesk, et cetera. Open Table had a really fun session in the hospitality industry. So give it a watch. But thanks for giving us your take on some of the stuff that we covered yesterday, Nikola. And have a good weekend. Okay.
Our very thank you for hosting all the events.
It was a ton of fun. But now I'm going to take a nap.
Have a good weekend.
See you later, Nikola.